everybody. My name is Chris. Welcome to the Honestly Bilal podcast again. The show for the aspiring ophthalmologist, residents who are training to be ophthalmologists, and then obviously practicing ophthalmologists. Today, we have another special guest. His name is Dr. Mark Greiner, and he is an associate professor of ophthalmology and visual sciences at the University of Iowa. He is the medical director of the Iowa Alliance Ibank. He's a fellowship director for the corneal and external disease and refractive surgery program at the University of Iowa. And he is a Robert Joell Brightfelt professor of corneal research. That is a mouthful. So he does a lot. He's doing some really interesting work. So we wanted to get him on the show and see what he's about. So Dr. Greiner, welcome to the show.
Chris, I'm flattered to have the opportunity to do this. By way of introduction, all of the things that you just said about me makes me feel really, really privileged to be here. It never seems like you do all these things, but then when someone introduces you like this, it's true. I do all these things. It's humbling. Thank you for letting me do this with you. I appreciate it.
Of course. And, I did my OA rotation at the University of Iowa, and everybody was telling me, you need to get Dr. Greiner on this show because he is one of the most interesting people. So I had to bug you for a few weeks, to get you on here, but it's finally happened. Excited to be here.
It's happened. The universe has conspired.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's get started here. So, the first question we usually ask all of our guests is, why did you choose ophthalmology when you were a medical student? And then for you, what led you to decide on pursuing cornea as a fellowship? And obviously now you're a practicing cornea specialist.
So the short answer is mentors. Mm-hmm. And the long answer goes like this. It all started when my parents got divorced and I went to clinics with my mom. My mom is a public health nurse, okay? And I grew up in Los Angeles, and as a child of the late 70s and early 80s, as a product of divorce and a wonderfully, wonderfully directive and giving mom, who was a nurse, she sort of showed me the ropes of healthcare. So what I knew about healthcare all came from going to this, small but high volume public health clinic. Not just any public health clinic in LA in the mid 80s, but it turns out it had one of the highest HIV census, populations in the world. So I went with my mom, who's not just a public health nurse, she's an STD public health nurse, to clinics with her all the way through, the beginning of HIV/AIDS. And, I remember back when they didn't have the virus yet, when there was a lot of stigma attached to the disease, and they called it GRID, gay cancer. I grew up with all of the nurses doing all of that hard work in the Hollywood Wilshire Health Clinic in LA. And my mom, by bringing me in and showing me what it was like to be in a community of healthcare providers and caregivers around this awful pandemic. At that time, I guess it wasn't a pandemic, it was just a regular old epidemic, just really gave, it gave me a sense of what I wanted in a job, what I wanted for my life, what felt like success to me, and what felt right. And so, that's where I first learned about gallows humor. And, the need to make fun where you can, and not of other people, but just, the need for humor in the darkest of times. I remember looking at spirochetes in a dark field microscope when I was 9. I remember all of this. And so when it came time, years later, winding through a whole bunch of different, things like going to Berkeley and getting an English degree and working in healthcare consulting for a while and finding my way back to actually wanting to do clinical medicine, it was in my 3rd year of medical school. I remember vividly my really good friend at the time, Gabe Banis, Gabe and I were thick as thieves through med school at UC Davis, and he'd have my family over, my wife Melissa, my kid, actually before my kids, but they'd have us over. I'm Jewish. They'd have us over for Passover, Seder at the Manis household. Well, the old man at the table, Mark Manis, someone I knew was in ophthalmology, but I really didn't know anything about ophthalmology. He said, Mark, what are you going to do? I said, well, I'm thinking about infectious diseases. He said, oh, really? And I said, yeah, well, my mom was this, STD public health nurse. That's what I know. I think it's really great. And I was really wanting to do medicine. I really liked the intellectualism of medicine. And he said, you should really think about doing ophthalmology. And I looked at him, I said, ophthalmology? He said, yes, you'd be surprised. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, okay. And I go back and I tell my mom about this. And I said, eyeballs, really? And she said, yeah, really? Eyeballs? You should really maybe consider listening, and sure enough, I did. And I did a rotation with Dr. Manis as a med student, and just one encounter in, and I was hooked.
Yeah.
Hooked because of him, because of Dr. Mark Manis. This guy was just an inspiration, just like my mom was, just like all of her coworkers were, all of my teachers up to that point. You had this wonderful man in Dr. Mark Manis. And Mark and I are great friends now. He's been a life mentor for many years, but really it starts with the inspiration that a teacher can bring a hungry student. And it was just right place, right time, right encouragement. And all of these things happened. And it's because he opened the door to my education that I'm here right now.
That's awesome. And I just, the field of ophthalmology is so small that I think the role of mentorship is even more amplified, compared to some of the other specialties. And I have those mentors in my life. So far, I'm not even an ophthalmologist yet, so there's not much career to affect, but still people have influenced me greatly, and that's what I really appreciate about the field as well. So that's awesome. So you said that you did medical school in California. So I got to ask,
yep,
what drew you from all the way out in California to a city like Iowa? I'm sure there's a lot of parallels, differences between those two areas. So what exactly drew you to the University of Iowa?
Again, I'll give you a short answer and a long answer. The short answer is the people. The people drew me here. The people keep me here. This is a wonderful, really kind of family and family style department in the Department of Ophthalmology and Visual Sciences here at Iowa. And, the long answer goes like this. When I was looking to get a job, and I was a fellow, I did a presentation at Cornea Society that year. So that was in like October or whatever it was that year that I was a fellow. And I did my fellowship at Devers Eye Institute in Portland, which is a wonderful fellowship. And so that comes with some name recognition right there, because, I was Mark Terry's fellow and Mike Stryko's fellow. And so that automatically, when you're up on the podium giving a talk and you're from that fellowship, kind of like, just like we like to do here with Iowa, these great programs, you're up on the podium and the name recognition of your association automatically gets you on a radar. And I think that I caught I was caught on the radar by now my former partner, Dr. Ken Goins, who is now at KUMC, but at the time was here at the University of Iowa. And lo and behold, he was great friends with Mark Terry. And so I sat down for the luncheon, and Goins came up to me and said, "What are you doing next year?" And I said, "Well, I'm looking for a job." And I'd love to do academics. And he said, "Have you considered Iowa?" And so now, record scratch, stop right there, right? So, what do you say? You say, you say what you mean. And what I said and what I meant was, absolutely. Are you kidding? Iowa? I mean, this is a storied place. So, I tried to get in here for residency. And you'd think, being Mark Manus's med student, and Mark Manus was a fellow here, okay, did his fellowship in cornea here, you'd think that, that Tom Oding and everyone else would have said, oh yeah, absolutely, that's Manus's boy. Of course, we'll give him an interview. Wrong. They didn't give me an interview for residency. Didn't get an interview. I didn't apply for the fellowship interview. But I relish the chance to actually get into a place like Iowa. And by a place like Iowa, I mean, leading, institution, on the forefront of education, teaching, research, creating new knowledge, clinical care, wonderful outcomes, all of these things, top 10, but really down to earth people. So Ken was the exemplar of, the Iowa way. He was the first person I really met, that was just a down to earth individual who was a dedicated ophthalmologist and caregiver. And as soon as I came here to see it in person, I was just blown away by how authentic and genuine and how alike Iowa was compared to, Hollywood Wilshire Health Clinic with my mom, and down to earth, hardworking people that really care. Same thing at Davis. Remember, I said that Manus was an Iowa fellow. I'm convinced that when he came straight out of his fellowship and went to Davis, and now he's chair out there, been for a long time, he took the Iowa way and all of what he brought to it as well. But I think that Iowa way made his way out to Davis. So I had this kind of echo chamber effect of all the things that made Iowa really stand out as a special place. It was the same kinds of influences that I had come to admire, like, and call that feeling of home in whatever it is that I do, along the way. So Iowa instantly felt like home as soon as I saw it. And so it's not just the, a number or on a ranking or anything like that. You got to look under the hood. You got to get, you got to get a good up close look and see how it feels, and it was I was sold immediately as soon as I came out here.
And I can't overstate this enough of how down to earth everybody is at Iowa. It's from the residents to the faculty. And I think this interview is just a reflection of that. You agreeing to be on this platform with, an away rotation student that you barely got to speak with and doing this. So, I mean, you are just a reflection of that and the whole program as a whole. So can't thank you enough for doing this again.
No, I appreciate it. And you know what, I do like to believe that I am one of many down to earth, hardworking, caring professionals in the ophthalmology and visual sciences department here at Iowa. I mean, I think we're all like that, and that's why we all, get along, and that's why we more than get along. Again, we're family, and that's why we do all of what we do. My department chair, Keith Carter, likes to put it this way: how else are you going to get a bunch of people to come out in the middle of nowhere unless you're going to make this the best place to work and to raise families and to be, I mean, it's a wonderful community that is in the Great Flyover that that you wouldn't otherwise think about unless you came here to see it and know what it is that we do.
Exactly. Perfectly said, Dr. Greiner. Before we talk about you being the medical director of an Ibank and the corneal research that you're doing, I want to ask, what's the catch about cornea? Why do residents need to apply to a corneal fellowship?
So, as we all know, the cornea is the most important part of the body. It's, it goes cornea, ABC, right? Cornea, airway, breathing, circulation. So, you can't do all that stuff unless you're seeing, right? So, the cornea it's just a wonderfully elegant, part of the body and of a really elegant organ, in the eye. and it's cool. It's structure and function and, physiology and optics and physics and all of the and living and life and sensation. All of these things are just, packed tightly into a really small part of the body. And it's not without irony that you undertake a career in cornea. That you start off like super broad, and you're doing all this science stuff, and then you go progressively down, and then by the time you're done with med school, you're like only doing 10% of what you actually trained to do. And then you go through ophthalmology, and then you go even smaller and smaller. And now, at a certain point, I'm like subcellular, right? And now I'm back doing mitochondrial work, and I'm back in broad medicine. I'm back in big organismal stuff.
Right.
And so it's amazing to me how you can focus, and get simultaneously more broad and more impactful in the practice of the cornea specialist. But that's exactly what I've done. Cornea is cool. That's why, everyone should think about doing it. We care about our outcomes with vision. It's more than just, the retina, refraction of, can you see the lights on, lights off? Great, you're wonderful. Anatomical success is always appreciated, no question about it. Not to throw my retina colleagues under the bus. But you get all the wows of great visual outcomes and great saves and really, really tough surgeries and really elegant and slick ones. You get to have just maximum impact in what you're doing in cornea. And it's a wonderful mix of all the things that are holy in medicine, I think.
I think this is a perfect segue into talking about the research that you're doing right now. You mentioned that, even though the field of study seems to get smaller, the research and the impact that you're creating is very broad. So can you tell us a little bit specifically about, what type of research you're doing with respect to cornea and how that can hopefully clinically help patients moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started off my career here in Iowa wanting to do clinical research, much like my mentors, particularly Mark Terry, who had this wonderful endothelial keratoplasty study group and, taught a whole lot of people how to do DSEC and now DMAC. And I figured, okay, I'm going to start, with prospective collection of my outcomes, and we're going to go from there. And it was in 2012, and I'd only done 7 DMACs. DMACs were not popular really then. Nothing was standardized. So I got a chance to help really contribute to some of the development of that procedure, especially here at Iowa. And so fine, great. But I also I asked myself a question. Actually, it was even before I asked the question. It was an observation back when I was in residency, and I saw DSEC happening. And you punch out the donor tissue, and you have this rim, and it has some peripheral endothelium. And I'm like, I wonder if you can't do something good with that tissue and use it to try and inform ourselves about what the graft's going to do. Because if I can find some correlation between the peripheral corneal endothelial cells that we're not transplanting and the outcomes of the transplanted tissue, wow, we might actually learn something about how, donor tissue works, why some better than others. So I had that in mind when I went to fellowship, and through fellowship and through the recruiting process here, actually, I got hooked up with one of my friends and colleagues now, Dr. Randy Carden here in neuro-ophthalmology of all things. And when I had my interview out here in Iowa, he said, you're interested in endothelial cell function. Great. You should think about this thing called a seahorse. And I said, seahorse? And I said, tell me more. So he told me about this non-contact mitochondrial respirometer. And so think about that. So you can actually measure mitochondrial respiration in a population of cells without contacting them. Wow. And so it's this box. It's something made by now Agilent has the distributorship of this, but the Seahorse extracellular flux analyzer is what I ended up sort of investigating as an early tool. And no one had really done this in ophthalmology before. And so we published a paper on looking at the mitochondrial respiration and glycolytic function, backbones of metabolism in corneal endothelial cells using donor tissue as a model. And that was like one of my first really big papers. And so I saw myself making this transition to, looking now at donor tissue, because I was interested in donor tissue. You can't come, from the pedigree of Mark Manus and Mark Terry without being interested in Ibank. So that was already in my bloodstream also. So, looking at donor tissue and how to make it better and using this new interesting technology, you don't just want to use technology just because it's out there. The reason why this resonated and continues to resonate in my career as a researcher is because corneal endothelial cells are highly energy dependent. They're big energy utilizers. They're essentially, as I tell my patients, fancy schmancy water pumps. You got the inner lining of the cornea, fluid creeps into it from the anterior chamber, and this energy-based cell layer pumps fluid, really pumps ions, and with it passively fluid back into the anterior chamber. That's the pump leak hypothesis, right? So by studying the pump function of this and looking at energy utilization, oxygen consumption as a way to make ATP to drive the pumps and drive the ion, and pumping mechanism. This is a good way, I thought at the time, and still feel, to understand the function of this really important layer of cells that really doesn't repair itself, which is why we're all in business as cornea transplant surgeons currently. And so, that was sort of the genesis for looking at all sorts of things. And as I've gotten through, from this question to that question, answering this question brings 10 other questions and all that stuff. And that's the wonderful thing about research. Well, anyways, as you're going through this, it turns out that mitochondrial function is extremely important, not just to donor tissue, but because mitochondrial function is impaired and impacted by some really common diseases in the world of ophthalmology. One of them is Fuchs endothelial cell dystrophy.
Right. Another
one is diabetes. So in reverse order, diabetes is something that I really sort of started investigating in a big way, because we know that by 2050, a third of our country are going to be diabetics. And so if we don't get in front of the diabetes issue now, we're going to have a humongous problem all through ophthalmology. How does that impact cornea and corneal endothelial cells? Well, it turns out there's a direct impact of the disease on corneal endothelial cells. So that was another early paper, from my group, looking at the impact. We showed that the more severe the diabetes in donor tissue, the worse the mitochondrial respiration, spare respiratory capacity, the less chance that these cells have to respond to stressful, conditions like going through a transplant. All of that work ended up, with some really cool observations from our iBanking group. Our iBanker, Greg Schmidt, who's a great friend and colleague over at Iowa Lions iBank, was the first to really observe that when you take diabetic tissue and you start preparing it for DMAC, it tends to tear and you end up wasting more graft tissue. We reported on that. Lots of these other diabetic studies that we've done really have led to a growing awareness of the impact of diabetes in the world of cornea transplantation. And I'm proud to tell you that, now I sit on the executive committee for the diabetes endothelial keratoplasty study, a multi-center randomized, now NEI funded prospective, clinical trial that is going to start enrolling and recruiting here over the next 3 years. We're going to learn a whole lot by randomizing DMAC donor tissue with or without diabetes for recipients getting DMAC about the relative health impact of diabetes on donor corneal tissue and donor outcomes after DMAC. So, all of this stuff sort of ends up finding a home like that. And then I mentioned Fuchs dystrophy. The mitochondrial story with Fuchs dystrophy is well characterized, but not extremely well understood. We really don't know some fundamental things about why it is that Fuchs ends up with progressive cell death. And just like I'm trying to make corneal transplant outcomes, better and better, I'm also trying to make clinical care, surgical interventions, non-surgical interventions more impactful for our patients. So, Fuchs is the number one indication for corneal transplantation, has been for the last 8 years, 9 years, and it will continue to be until we end up with a world where we have medical interventions. And if I can get to the root of why it is mitochondria aren't working so well and stave that off, I might be able to prevent transplants for a significant subsection of people, especially if we can diagnose them early. And we can diagnose Fuchs early, and we all know that Fuchs is progressive. So if I can come up with something to help prevent the progression of Fuchs dystrophy from becoming a surgical disease, then we can make a humongous impact. And that's exactly where we're going in our lab. The motto in my lab, by the way, I think you'll like this. The motto is prevent the transplant, perfect the transplant. Okay? And so that's really what drives our group. And it's a great group, multi-disciplinary, collaborators from various schools here in the University of Iowa, and we're all based out at the Iowa Lions Ibank. And it's a cool thing. So that's a little bit about my research.
That is so cool. Prevent the transplant, perfect the transplants. I'll keep that in mind moving forward. And I think just reading all your works that you've done so far, that the impact that this could have moving forward, I think is huge. And the translational aspect of what you're doing, I think, is so commendable. And hopefully I'll be able to think of something novel like you have and apply it to help patients in the future. And I'm sure everybody else is on the waiting to doing that as well.
Well, it's thanks for that. I only have two things to say. Continue to keep your eyes open, because all of this starts with observations.
Right.
It started with looking at the donor rims when I was in a DSEC surgery in my second year. Wow. And of residency. And the other thing is mentorship.
Right.
People are going to. Again, the universe conspires, right? So, you come across the right people at the right time with the right questions.
Exactly. Keep my eyes open always. So again, great segue into talking about the Ibank. I know that you are the medical director of the Iowa Lions Ibank. So tell us a little bit about what that entails, being the medical director of an Ibank, and how you incorporate doing that with all of your other responsibilities. And do you think there's there's so much overlap between your hats, right? You being an director of the Ibank, doing research, corneal research, looking at transplants, and all that. So yeah, tell us a little bit more about that.
I'm going to show you this. It's on my monitor here in my office. Okay. Overlap is right. Okay. So this is
yes.
Iowa equals Iowa Lions Ibank equals cornea, team cornea. Right. It's all the same for me, right? Yes. So it's a lot of work to do all the different things, but it's wonderful work. And being a medical director is such a meaningful way to interact with all of the complexity and breadth of what we do in cornea. So I will say that I always kind of wanted to be a medical director, and when Dr. Goins moved on for family reasons to KUMC, that opportunity came up. I was an assistant medical director at the time. I had done the physicians leadership program through the Ibank Association of America. The EBAA is something that every resident should know about, and every fellow will get involved with, and every cornea professional should be plugged in with in a humongous way. But really, my partners right now, Jenny Ling and Chris Salas, they are with me and really leading me and leading others to bring the knowledge of all of what iBanking is and does to med students to residents. And so Dr. Ling is really spearheading a curriculum to help bring that awareness here at Iowa. Wow. So I think it's a wonderful thing that we do at the Ibank. We get to intersect with our donor families and all of the complexities of the emotions surrounding someone's death, and the opportunity that it can bring to use the gift of part of them, to help other people. To the recipients that we treat on a daily basis and shepherd them through, to the nuts and bolts of how all of this happens behind the scenes. And that's what a medical director really does, is we want to make sure that everyone is safe and that policies and procedures that are designed to maintain safety are executed. And it's a great and meaningful responsibility to be part of that whole process. Right. So we just had our Iowa Lions Ibank donor memorial ceremony yesterday here, and that's on the heels of our conclusion of our 65th year celebration. We've been here for 65 years, and it was just a really meaningful ceremony, not just in the middle of COVID, to be able to have an outside congregation of donor families and all of the ophthalmology professionals and eye banking professionals that are in our community. But it was just it's a celebration. It's a celebration of life and renewal and and the gift. And
yeah, I mean, I didn't know what that entailed, being a director of an eye bank, and I think everybody has a better understanding of that now with what you just talked about. And again, meaningful work that provides excellent care, but also maintaining relationships with patients. And I think that's awesome. So we're coming to the tail end of this interview, and I don't want to keep you for that much longer. So this question is really about the rest of your career. I mean, you've already done so much. You're associate professor at one of the top ophthalmology programs in the United States. You're a medical director of an eye bank, fellowship director, professor of research. So what are your goals from now on? I mean, I feel like, you're getting up to the top, so what's next for Dr. Greiner? What's the goal of moving forward?
I'm in the beginning, man. This is only 10 years into it for me. So I've got an easy 20 plus more years. Really, if I'm honest, I intend to stay involved in my academic career until the cows come home. I don't ever want to stop doing something in ophthalmology. I just absolutely love the trajectory of my career. I'm in love with my career, Chris.
Wow, that's awesome.
Simple as that, man. I love the way that it's been going from from clinical, and it's maintained clinical. I mean, my core identity, as a clinician, is my 2 heavy days of clinic and my 1 heavy day of OR. And for me, that's a sweet spot that I want to continue doing in my practice. And so that drives a lot, right? That drives my continued ability to be a physician. I love being a doctor. I love talking with people and helping out. I love being able to teach residents and fellows. I always want to continue to do that, and med students too. So, I want to continue doing all that stuff. So that's first and foremost. My research career, I want to continue to make that grow. The University of Iowa has so many wonderful avenues that have been developed in research in our department. I want to continue making the cornea research efforts blossom. My lab was really the first organized lab effort, here at the University of Iowa, to my knowledge. And so continuing to make my lab grow, and one of my great goals over the next really 5 years is to get my first federal grant award. It's like the lottery. You gotta play to win.
Right, right.
So, it takes a lot of work to do that, but we're
Yes.
plugging away at that. So
Mhm.
that's a goal.
Mhm.
Um, Developing the research and non-research careers of my partners, Dr. Ling and Dr. Salas, are
Right.
major goals.
Yes. Yes.
Major goals, and continuing to attract wonderful med students to become residents,
Mm.
and residents to become fellows that come out of our program with the Iowa way emblazoned on their souls,
Yes.
is a major thing for
Mm.
me. I want to continue training wonderful fellows in cornea that go on to do leadership activities that continue along our wonderful trajectory of 40 plus years of having an excellent cornea fellowship. I want them to be the leaders that the current leaders are.
Right.
The current leaders in cornea are really, many of them hail from, and
Mm.
it's wonderful. And I want that to continue. And I want to continue. All three of us here at Iowa want that to continue. So those are major goals. And I really, the success of the research program that we have here. I mean, the reason why people, I think, do research is because you can have an exponentially large impact. People that you never ever would ever meet, might be impacted by the work that you're doing, and it's just that exponential potential for impact that I think drives a lot of us in research, and that's certainly driving me. So continuing to drive at this success. Forget grants. I mean, grants are a measure of success. Papers are as well. Good papers make good grants. So continuing, I'm close to 50 publications right now. Getting to 100 within the next, number of years is something that I'm aiming for. But those are only measures of success. Really, the true success, maybe that's the answer, is that I don't know what true success looks like just yet, Chris.
Mm.
And I'll know it when I see it, but I know some measures of it, and I'm continuing to try for that.
Well, Dr. Greiner, I'm rooting for you, and I know that it's just going to be a matter of time before all of your goals are met. So I'm super excited to just witness all the great things you're going to do, and yeah, it's a privilege to see it.
You know what? It's all worth it when I see someone like you, and I see someone like Bilal, who I get to see on Monday, over in clinic.
Yeah.
When I see young, bright students wanting to go into ophthalmology and make a difference, and and we've got some really great teachers in ophthalmology as a profession. And this is just a wonderful corner in the house of medicine. And so it makes it all worthwhile to know that there are bright individuals that want to make a difference in this world, in our specialty. I think that's just cool.
Speaking of bright students, you're also on the admissions committee for the residency program. And I think aspiring ophthalmologists who are listening will be interested to hear about what you think makes a applicant successful, or possibly even stand out during, whether it's an interview or just throughout the process. Any tips or things that will help applicants on the trail?
Well, the wonderful thing about answering is that it's a non-answer.
Right.
This is great because, you are who you are, and you've done what you've done. And all you're doing in these applications is putting out what you've done. And yes, there's some artfulness to being able to package it right, and being able to, present, all of the wonderful things that you've done, but double down on yourself as an applicant. Pick what things you really think you like, that you want to highlight, that you want to go with, and just go with them. Be proud of yourself and your accomplishments, because that pride, and that sense of enthusiasm about what you're doing, that's what automatically, magically gets communicated onto paper and through Zoom in an interview. And so, it's remarkable. Now this can be our second year doing, Zoom stuff. I did it with fellowships. So I do this with fellowships and I do this with residents.
Wow.
Right. So, this is now going to be my third and fourth, application cycle, virtual. I'd say what really stands out for me, you may not like to think this, but I look all the way back at your organic chemistry grades. And I use that for, we all have our sort of litmus tests, right? So I look back at, how well you've done in school. You can't change these things now, right? So that's why I'm saying double down, because, you're here, you might as well just, say, hey, look, and I did great in organic chemistry. That's, it's my own personal quirk. I loved organic chemistry. I tutored it for a long time.
Okay.
I look to see how well-rounded you are. Yeah. I look to see, what's different about you, Chris Cho. What did you do? Tell me about yourself as a person. You didn't just come from, from a college environment where you did, you aced this and you aced that. You came from a family. You're a person. Tell me about you. I want to know about what drives you, and what makes you tick. What are you enthusiastic about? Because when you're passionate and you can connect with that passion, that's what's going to come through on an application. So it's not so much what I'm looking for, or how to make yourself stand out. It's just being you and being passionate.
Exactly.
And I think that's what comes through.
Sure. Speaking about passion, this is the last question before we wrap up. I like music. I like to make music, and I heard through the grapevine that you are also interested in music. Tell us a little bit about like what you do outside of, if you have any free time, if that's even a thing, with everything that you do. But if you do, you obviously have a family, so that's important. But any hobbies or anything like that you wanted to highlight for us?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So music is a way of life.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you play, by the way?
I'm a guitarist.
You're a guitarist, right?
Yeah.
And when did you start?
Probably in 8th grade or 7th grade.
Okay, 7th, 8th grade. That's great. And that was your first instrument?
No, so piano was my first, but I was rebellious and was like, this is stupid. Now I regret that decision of not continuing piano, but yeah.
When did you start piano?
Oh, definitely like when I was in elementary school, like 1st or 2nd grade, Yeah.
So like 6, 7 years old.
Exactly. Yeah.
Good. So I started playing piano like you. I started at 4.5, and I did it, really, really seriously. And I almost went into conservatory, and I said, you know what? I don't want to make music, something that should be fun into a profession. Right. And I picked up a number of instruments along the way. I did saxophone and started, dabbling with a little bit of jazz along the way as well. But the one that really stuck was the bass.
Wow. Okay.
So I picked up the bass probably because my cousin, who's 4.5 years older than me, and the closest thing that I have to a brother, we played in a lot of bands together through junior high and high school. Awesome. And he kind of took me under his wing and made fun of me along the way, and between all of that, the crucible of adolescence, I did gravitate toward the bass because, let's face it, it's a lot easier than the piano. It's a lot more cool than the piano. And like you, the rebel that went to guitar, I went to bass. It's a wonderful instrument because it's melody and rhythm, and it's the backbone of so much music. Right. In contemporary, rock, certainly. And so I play the bass. I've got a 77 Fender jazz bass that is a fun story about getting hosed on eBay when I got that instrument. And I salvaged the. Oh yeah, that's a fun one.
Next time.
That's the next one. I really I think it's if my vocation is ophthalmology and teaching, my avocation is musical education in the operating room. I didn't go to medical school and do residency to do anything less than be able to at least control what I'm listening to in the operating room.
Right.
I take that very seriously. And so at least I'll be able to help teach you about something you may not know about. And that's whatever is playing, in the OR at the time. So be warned.
Awesome. Right.
It's a musical education too.
Right. All the med students at Iowa, you have been warned if you're or even residents, when you're in the OR with Dr. Greiner, he's in control of the music. So all right. Well, Dr. Greiner, it was a pleasure speaking with you today. Thank you for taking time out to chat. And it was a pleasure. I learned a lot. I'm always inspired by the people in the field that are leading the charge and getting to places that I hope to be at one day and making an impact like you've been doing. So yeah, just
Chris, I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much for wasting half an hour of your life on me.
No, this is not a waste at all. This is a session of pearls and wisdom that I gained. So hopefully we'll talk with you soon, Dr. Greiner. And everybody that's interested, please check out Dr. Greiner and his research works and everything that he's been doing at the University of Iowa. And obviously check out University of Iowa's ophthalmology program, one of a kind. Everybody's down to earth, super personable. Plus they're really smart and do a lot of amazing things. So, all right. Thanks, Dr. Greiner. And we'll see you next time. Okay.
Thanks so much, Chris. See you later.